You're listening to the Educated Cowgirl Podcast, Season 2, Episode 7. Hey Cowgirls! We all want to do what is best for the horse as owners, trainers, and breeders to help them to do their job better and help make the equine industry better. However, did you know that you can take it a step further and use their DNA and genetic makeup to learn so much more about the many impressive traits horses can have and pass on to their offspring? On today's episode, I talk about all things genetics and more with this week's guests. One topic that I may nerd out about more than some others when it comes to horses is equine genetics. And I am not the only one with a strong interest in it. Christa Lafayette and her team at Etalon, two of which you will hear from in this episode, Holly and Laura, are equally obsessed, if not more, about it. Their vision for Etalon shows so much passion for wanting to improve how we breed our horses through looking at their behavioral and physical genetic traits, but also to ensure the sustainability and growth of the equine industry. They work with you to obtain the best results possible so you can work better with your horse, to have the information you need to know to provide the best care for your horse, the right training, and help you see their greatest potential for success. My conversation with these ladies was so fascinating and educational. We discussed so many great topics in this episode, from reading between the lines and identifying key aspects of the recessive traits for abnormalities in horses' genes, to knowing more about our horses' DNA can help us to better understand our horses' needs, to see them fulfill their potential in whatever discipline they show the most success in during their training. I believe that it is people like Christa and her team at Etalon that are helping to revolutionize and change the way we look at breeding and the equine industry for the future. So, without further delay, let's get into my conversation with Christa, Holly, and Laura. Hey, and welcome to the Educated Cowgirl Podcast, hosted by yours truly. My name is Abby Carpenter, and I am a cowgirl and equestrian through and through. I started this podcast wanting to make more of an impact in the equine industry. That's why I am making it my mission to help promote the industry to the public through sharing my love for horses through education and bringing other experts and professionals onto the podcast with me to discuss important topics that impact the horse community. So whether you are a crazy horse lady like me, want to learn more about horses, or want to learn more about the industry, you've come to the right place. On this podcast, we will be talking about ownership, horsemanship, fitness, faith, breeds, and so much more. We believe that it doesn't matter what type of saddle you ride in or the breed of horse you may ride. We all contribute to this community to make it great, and that there is always something to learn from the back of your horse. So grab a coffee and get ready to take some notes, and let's get started. This is the Educated Cowgirl Podcast. All right, so welcome back to the show, everyone. I am so thrilled with who I have for y'all today, as they are revolutionizing how we see breeding and the genetic makeup of performance horses. Thank you all so much for agreeing to talk with me today.
Thanks for the invitation. We're delighted to talk about horses any day.
Yes. All right. So if you could please go ahead and introduce yourselves, what you do, a little bit about your backgrounds, and a fun fact about yourselves.
I'm going to throw Holly under the bus first.
Absolutely. So my name is Holly. I've been with Etalon for over 2 years now. I actually started in our lab and then moved over to our customer service side. And now I work in our sales and marketing department. And so I've kind of seen every step of your horse's hair sample from the moment that it gets here until the moment that you get those results, and even afterwards. So if you have any questions, please never, ever feel afraid to reach out to us, because we can always help you. And a fun fact about me is that I have ridden almost every discipline out there. And so I kind of have experience across all industries, which makes talking to anybody an absolute blast, because I have been where you are.
Perfect.
Love it. I'm Laura. I'm still one of the new members of the team. I joined last September. I'm a thoroughbred owner and breeder. I have been my entire life. Kind of throw that into my fun fact, as I planned my first horse's conception at 11 and delivered him at 13. So I was eager to be a part of this growing organization, because every ounce of information we can have to help better understand our horses as horses, as athletes, and the potential that they have is phenomenal. So the more we know about them, the better we can do for them.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. My name's Christa Lafayette. I'm the CEO and founder of Etalon. My background is in biotechnology, with an expertise around surgical and behavioral models and preclinical medicine. Let's see. Fun fact. I love and am obsessed with horses, like
Mhm.
everyone else here. I do ride. I do have breeding stallions. I have ridden almost every discipline, including polo in college. I'm about the worst polo player you'll ever see, ever. Um, and outside of the arena, I'm a major fan of scuba diving and a novice dog agility and protection trainer.
Very
So
cool.
hope that covers it.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. I love it. Yeah, so speaking of backgrounds and starting from the beginning, can you dive more into how Etalon was started, what the idea was behind it, and your mission or goals for wanting to offer these types of services?
I think it was started like many businesses are started. Somebody saw a need and said, "Hey,
Hmm.
we can do this really well, or we can do it better." In this case, I had horses, and I was required to genetically test them for the first time, um, and the experience was horrible. It was like expensive and slow, and the results were inaccurate. And when I tried to ask questions, it was met with some, I think difficulty might be an
Hmm.
understatement, just not a lot of help. Couldn't
Hmm.
call anyone, couldn't speak to anyone when you did. They were seemingly like bitter for reasons you can't really understand. It just wasn't good.
Hmm.
And there wasn't anything I could do about it at the time.
Right.
Fast forward a few years, and my horses were being shown in dressage. And one of my trainers at the time had to be a dressage scorecard. And I noticed that the scorecard measures a behavior and a score, and a behavior and a score, and a behavior and a score. And that's exactly the same scorecard you use in the laboratory for things like traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury and behaviors,
Hmm.
basically around medical devices and therapeutics. And I started to think, well, geez, we're collecting the DNA on these animals and we have their scores and we have way too much information about them, photos and videos. This could be a way to discover things about all mammals without any animal living in a lab. So it's cruelty-free animal science.
Hmm.
And I ran over to my old stomping ground at Stanford University, and I talked with one of my friends, Carlos Bustamante, and he was the guy who first made the dog breed test for the Cornell Wisdom project, Mars.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I showed him my idea about not just DNA testing, but developing this crowdsourced way to discover things. And it depends on the knowledge of the people who own the animals, the horse owners.
Hmm.
And he said, I'm in. And then he picked up the phone and he called Dr. Samantha Brooks, and she's this amazing equine geneticist who's discovered things like lavender foal syndrome, Tobiano, a lot of stuff that you would recognize. And
Right.
she said, oh, this is going to be fun. Let's do this. And that's how it started.
Nice. Yeah. So would you say that your goal was basically just to educate people more about genetics, or like what was the main goal in starting?
To have them participate with all of the secrets that they know. You may not realize it, but because you are that animal's keeper and its companion,
Hmm.
you know things about that animal that no one else knows. And if I give you a genetic report and I say, for example, on the simplest level, oh, the genetics say it's bay, and you call me back and go, but it's white.
Hmm.
I go, wait, what? And we can go look at the genes and find out, well, what mutation does it have that's new that made it white?
Yeah.
Right? Or I could say, well, the genes say it's got severe swayback. And I can ask you, does it? And you'll tell me, yes, it does. Or no, no, it doesn't. Then I can go back to the science and go, okay, this works or this doesn't work. And
Hmm.
that's really what it's about, is people interacting with this incredible amount of knowledge they have about their animals. The average horse owner is being sold genetic testing and sort of being told this is truth, and we know we're the experts. But we're not there yet with genetics. We
Hmm.
know a lot, but we don't know all of it for sure. And there's so much more to discover.
Right.
And there's so much gray area around genetics that it makes sense not to tell a horse owner, but to involve them and ask them questions because their information is valuable
Right.
as much as the science, right? And it
Yeah.
contributes to it, and it contributes to discovery and accelerated discovery.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love what you said about so much more to discover. So recently across businesses, a big topic has been creating the right culture within the company and having the right team. How does that play into the team you've created at Etalon?
So this is a tricky question. And I'm going to say this as carefully as I can, but when you are the boss,
Mm-hmm.
no one's going to tell you if you're terrible or if you're creating a bad culture or if you're breaking rules. Holly's grinning, just so you know. She's like, and Laura's chuckling. And so nobody's going to come up to me and say, the culture you're creating is terrible. But what I can tell is when you walk around in the lab and in the offices, the energy is obvious. The obsession with what we have and what we find is obvious. When someone sends in a sample of a horse and something's weird about it or interesting,
Mm-hmm.
people are like on their phones texting back and forth. They're running back and forth between the offices, and you can't manufacture that.
Right.
So the obsession with what we do is real, and the drive to find out things and spoil the daylights out of our clients, it's all real. And that's something that I feel like we've created together.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that mutual obsession to do the best for the clients.
Yeah, there are no wallflowers in this building. We all want to do stuff and we want to be loud about it. And I'm not saying we don't argue. We argue all the time about
Mm-hmm.
everything. But the point is, we feel like we can. We can
Mm-hmm.
push the limits, and everybody's doing this for the same reason. We want to know how this works.
Right. Right. Exactly. So when you were starting Etalon, with what challenges did you run into and how were you able to overcome them? And then what did you see? What was that need that you mentioned in the industry that was lacking before Etalon?
You want to know how many challenges we have. How long is this show?
Yeah.
So the challenges, we have all the challenges. Let's say I'm going to sound like the Jurassic Park. We have all the challenges of your average startup plus every major zoo and every science lab ever built. It's a pain in the butt. But our actual challenges come down to simple things like who's going to fund this? How are we going to make it run? How's it going to run efficiently? Then there are people who maybe or consider themselves competitors and they're always out there to squash you, even if they do or do not know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the famous one, trolls. Trolls are such a
Yes.
party. They start a rumor. My best friend's cousin's dog's aunt's uncle had this test result. And there's no truth to it. There's no record of it. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
that name or their names or the horses' names or any in the database, and no one's ever said a word, but now it's truth.
Yeah.
Right. And so the temptation, I think, is to respond, to rise to it, but that doesn't get you anywhere. Trolls have nothing better to do than say bad things about people all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Your best bet is to stay the course, do what you do really, really well, reset the standard that people are accustomed to, and spoil the daylights out of your clients and mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Mean what you want to do and mean what you say and back it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like just basically try and tune it out as much as you can and know in your heart that you know you're doing the right thing. And then yeah. No, that's good. So when you were mentioning about a need that you saw or like something was lacking in the industry, can you be a little bit more specific about what need you saw in the industry for this deeper meaning for equine genetics?
Sure. So speaking as a horse person, a client of genetic labs,
Mm-hmm.
when I first went to test my horses, I had a small variety, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who to test what for, if that even makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't know what HYPP was or why I should test for it. I didn't understand why I needed to test parentage. I didn't understand what a goody was. And I have a pretty strong science background and I could figure it out. But if it was that hard for me, how could anybody else do it? Right? How can the average person who's not deep into the sciences figure out what to do? And every one of these tests was an individual test, and they were charging me more and more money for every single test, right?
Uh-huh.
And I thought, well, we're at a place in science where you can run a genetic sequence of an animal and you can pull all the different variants together and you can create this whole picture of an animal,
Mm-hmm.
right? How tall is it? How fast is it? What's its temperament like? What kinds of health risks does it have? And maybe what discipline is it going to be best at? And does that suit my lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
And so it occurred to me that if we did this on a much larger scale, we'd know everything from color and size and speed and temperament to health risks and ways to manage this animal. And does it fit my lifestyle? And am I asking it to do something it can actually do? And so
Yeah.
that was what we thought was missing.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. So during the NRHA webinar, you talked about how this can help us in evaluating different diseases horses have, and you mentioned HYPP a little bit, potentially pass on to their progeny. Do you think that as we learn more through DNA, we could either decrease or eliminate some of these diseases we're seeing?
Oh, absolutely. You have to be careful with those words because sometimes when folks discover a new, disease variant,
Mm-hmm.
and for example, something like lethal white overo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one copy of lethal white overo, you have these beautiful white markings and maybe a blue eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got two copies, you're born all white with an incomplete GI system and you die.
Mm-hmm.
So the message there is a little is okay, a lot is bad. If we were to take the knee-jerk reaction and say, all right, get rid of every animal that's got what we call a lethal recessive, one copy of something that could kill you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of all animals who have that.
Mm-hmm.
How many animals do you think we'd have to get rid of?
Probably a lot.
All of them, including
Yeah.
us. Every single mammal walking the planet has multiple lethal recessives. So you can't eliminate them.
Right.
What you have to do is not combine them,
Right.
right? So in understanding what they are, okay, this female has this male has that. All right, well, you can cross these two and they'll pass on carrier status, which
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't affect them. But don't cross these two because the baby will be born affected or dead.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, like everything else, education and moderation.
Yeah.
Know what you're dealing with and move forward carefully in a calculated manner.
Right. Right. And I mean, as an example, you mentioned this in the webinar about the deaf gene with horses with blue eyes and bald faces, which there's a lot of those in reining right now.
Yeah.
So when you say we can't cross them, how can people on your website see like, okay, if this horse will be recessive for the deaf gene, but this horse will make it dominant. Without knowing this, how can we like avoid crossing that to where they won't have that deaf gene show up?
So with the deafness, it's tricky. You're
Mm-hmm.
right. There are multiple variants that
Mm-hmm.
result in increase in deafness or the likelihood of deafness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to sort of know which ones those are. Things like Splashed White 5, the one that we found, Splashed White 7, the one that we found, and then there are others existing. There's the legacy one, Splashed White 2. You see in a lot of the babies out there.
Mm-hmm.
So you understand that it's out there, and you shouldn't combine certain ones because you increase the level of deafness. That's why we made tools like Build a Horse, so you can mock cross the sire and the dam and see how many copies of what this foal is likely to get.
Right.
And it will include warnings and say, hey, you probably don't want to do this because you're going to end up with problems. And it will not willingly cross two lethal recessives. So in other words, if you ask it to build you, a bay with blue eyes and white socks, it won't cross two lethal whites on purpose. Right? Because it'll say, this is bad. You don't want to do this. Here are some alternate options. But in doing so, you have to read between the lines. There are still things we don't understand, right? We understand that animals that have a copy of Splashed White 2 or 5 or 7
Mhm.
are at an increased risk for deafness.
Yeah.
We know that if we add more white to it, splashed white 1, splashed white 3, something like that, we're almost certainly going to get an animal with more white and deafness.
Right.
So you have to sort of be willing to do your homework and also be willing to go, okay, we don't know everything, but this is how I'm going to decrease my risk. If I
Right.
keep it to one copy of this, then I'm probably going to be okay.
Right.
Anything more, and I'm going to risk deafness. But then also, again, suitability. So let's say you've got an animal with a completely bald face and it's deaf. Well, why are there so many animals like that in the competitive world? Some people say it's cruel to breed an animal that is deaf because
Right.
it can't hear the lions coming. Okay, let's be real for a minute. They're never ever going to be where there are lions, ever,
Right.
never. But what they are going to do is enter an arena with 50,000 screaming people.
hmm
Do you think entering an arena with screaming people is going to be harder or less hard for an animal that has impaired hearing?
I would say harder, but I could be wrong also.
Well, if you can't hear all those people and you're just paying attention to your rider and your cues,
Right.
it's probably less of a distraction and
Right.
less of a spook factor.
Oh yeah.
Now, the bad side or downside of that is it's harder for you as a trainer if you're not accustomed to working with animals who can't hear you,
Right.
right? So there are barriers to both sides, but people just have to step back and take a good hard look at why are there so many animals with this? Maybe because it's a competitive advantage and people didn't realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, we do see that people breed like with those horses that have that splash white genes or whatever because they are very talented athletes. But then you
Yeah.
have that training side, you have to kind of weigh the consequences of okay, well, he has a copy of this, but he also shows really great potential to be talented in this. So you kind of have to
Yeah.
weigh your options of what you're willing to sacrifice to get the horse you want. So
Right. And what kind of a rider and trainer are you? Is that something you can deal with?
right. Yeah, exactly.
And that works also with the things like the temperament and the gatedness, all these different things. There's nothing wrong with any of them. It just comes down to who are you?
Yeah.
What's your level of expertise and what do you deal with well?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so on another point with this, have you been able to see the potential for if a horse would be prone to more injuries, whether it's through competing, training, or whichever it may be, would be more prone to kissing spines, or something with these results?
We have. So we do have a study out there that shows that animals with a certain variant set are more susceptible to things like kissing spines, right? A higher grade of kissing spines. And does that mean they have it? No.
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean if they get it, are they going to suffer more? Probably
Mm-hmm.
yes, right? We know that they get a higher grade. And then there's this whole division between who shows pain and who doesn't. And that's a whole nother level of this.
Mm-hmm.
But for sure, if you understand as much as you can about your animal's genetics, you're going to understand your risk factors and where you should probably pay more attention to taking care of your horse. There are simple physical limitations, things
Mm-hmm.
like if you have the mutation in the DMRT3, they call it gatedness. And no, it doesn't just exist in gated horses. It
Yeah.
exists in quarter horses and paint horses and even some warm bloods. If you know your horse has one copy,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have trouble with lead changes underweight,
Mm-hmm.
going to have trouble with a proper 3-beat canter. If you are a really good trainer and they are a really good horse, you might be able to compensate for that.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, you're riding around on a horse trying to make a figure-8 pattern as a reiner, trying to make a clean lead change, you're going to end up with crow hopping and crossfiring and all of that. And is it really fair to continue to punish the horse for something they can't do very well?
Right.
You break them if you don't
Yeah.
understand that,
Yeah.
right? So things like that, understanding your horse's capability, not just things like tendinopathy and OCD and kissing spines, but what is it that they can do really well and easily, and where do you need to help them? And ultimately, is this the right horse for this discipline and for you?
Right. And seeing, as you said, knowing your horse better can like know that like, okay, why can't this type of horse can't be trained 5 days a week he needs 3 days a week, or he needs more
Yeah.
time off to rest or recover.
Yeah.
Which, yeah. So, okay. So something else that you've talked about is the genomic inbreeding value. And a couple of breeds you mentioned, their percentage is quite high for inbreeding. So as we start to get more and more information from DNA tests, do you think it will help breeders responsibly decide on what colts to keep as stallions to expand the lines we are seeing and potentially decrease the inbreeding percentage? And then how do you think it will affect what mares they breed to as well?
So I think that there's an inherent bias out there that it's all about the stallion, which,
Mm-hmm.
I can get on a soapbox about sexism right now, but I'm not going to. Um, but the issue is that there's this model, there's this idea that this is the best stallion. If
Right.
you breed your mares to him, those progeny will be amazing athletes.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that there are parents out there that are superstars
Mm-hmm.
and their kid is an idiot.
Yeah.
That's just how that works sometimes.
Yes.
And the thing is, it does not matter if the stallion is a superstar. If the mare's genetics don't complement his and they don't both pass down the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't about this stallion is the best stallion to breed to everyone. It's
Mm-hmm.
this stallion is the best stallion to breed to a certain number of mares. And the way to check that is to mock them against each other. Again, I hate to keep going back to build a horse, but
Yeah.
what you can do with something like build a horse is you can take the stallion and the mare, and it will show you the traits that you're likely to get.
Mm-hmm.
Your speed, your color, your temperament, your lack of or gatedness, depending on what
Mm-hmm.
it is that you want. And then it will also look directly at the genes,
Mm-hmm.
not the pedigree estimate of their inbreeding, and give you an estimated calculation of what's the outcome of that foal. And in doing that, you can drive the inbreeding value down
Mm-hmm.
and keep the traits you know that you want,
Yeah.
right? So we don't have to kill off anyone.
Yeah.
And we don't have to assume this stallion is bad because he has a high inbreeding coefficient.
Right.
It doesn't matter because if you breed him to the correct mare, the foal will not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, and I love that you said the mare that what the mare brings in genetic wise is just as important, and how she handles, because we all know there's like $1 million producing mares right now that are doing so phenomenally well. So that's really good.
Yeah, and here's a fun fact. If you
Mm-hmm.
have two full-bred mares,
Mm-hmm.
the mares are by the same parents.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, they will have the same inbreeding coefficient. In reality, they don't
Oh,
because their parents did not pass along the same genetic content to each mare,
right.
right? And the reason you know that is because if you have siblings,
Mm-hmm.
you're not exactly the same as your siblings, right?
No,
At
no.
all. And the reason is your parents, every time they had a kid, passed on different genes
Yes.
that they carried. And so
Yes.
the same is true in the mares. So if you breed sibling A to the stallion, your inbreeding coefficient may be very low. If you breed sibling B mare to the same stallion, it might be higher.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so good. So I thought this would be a fun example to talk about. So I am involved in ranch sorting and the cow horse side of the industry, and I'm curious if you have had any clients from that world. What have you found as far as what traits show up the most from cutting or cow horses?
So I don't have a formal study in front of me for cutting or cow horses.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that we've started to see algorithms for performance horses, and they're different than we thought.
Right.
One thing that I can point out that's really interesting is the muscle type, and that's the myostatin.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look in the science literature, that's called sprint versus endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what it means is if you inherited one copy of the mutation sprint from each
Mm-hmm.
parent, you have two copies total, and
Mm-hmm.
you're sprint type. And that means you're a little more muscular, a little more compact.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Mm-hmm.
faster 0 to 60 in the short distance,
Right.
right? And so 90 something percent of quarter horses are sprint type because they were
Right.
bred to sprint the quarter mile, right?
Right.
Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have endurance type horses. These animals have two copies of endurance, the original genotype of horses, we think.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not as fast, 0 to 60, but they can go and go and go for miles across the desert.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have those two opposite extremes, but let's say you're looking at race horses now, and you have a horse that won all three of the major distances, short, medium, and long, what was their genotype, do you think?
Probably more endurance based.
They have one copy of each.
Oh, okay.
It's really weird to think about, right?
Yeah,
So they have
yeah.
one copy of sprint and one copy of endurance, which means they have both traits together,
Mm-hmm.
which would make sense because they're faster than everybody else, but they can also go the distance.
Right.
What we are seeing, certain disciplines are showing these Cinderella horses that are really good, that rise above the rest, and they don't have the same genotype
Right.
as the mass of the horses. For example, and I hate to point to reining because I know that that's not
Yeah.
what you're asking me about.
Yeah.
But if you
No,
look
they're
at
good.
horses like Spook's Got a Whiz, or let's
Mm-hmm.
say you look at well, here's a good example. Allspice, not a
Mm-hmm.
reining horse, right? Both of those horses have what we call mixed myostatin. They are able to go fast, 0 to 60, and they have endurance.
Yeah.
My gut says, and this is without backing it up with numbers, probably some of the ranch sorting animals are more endurance type, but I don't know that. We
Mm-hmm.
could definitely go back and study that and see what
Yeah.
kinds of trends we see, and we can come back and update you.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting. So when someone would be looking at breeding for a more sprint or cow horse type, or maybe just even a ranch horse, where do you think it would show that a horse would have the greatest potential to be cowy, as we call it, or be able to handle the stress of these disciplines? And then how do you think having horses show more curious or vigilant traits could affect their performance in the sorting or cutting pen?
So the things that you mentioned, it's not going to be one or the other. It's probably a combination,
Okay.
right? And it also part of the equation is the person steering the animal, right? Who's
Right.
on the back? Who's the partner?
Right.
And I have some questions for you. If you're doing ranch sorting, do lead changes and three-beat canter come into play at all, or do you prefer a
Not really
smoother
lead
horse?
changes. Not really
Yeah.
lead changes because you're kind of going from either working the gate, going back and forth, or
Yeah.
you're actually sorting the cows out of
So
the
that's
pen.
interesting because I've heard a couple people tell me that the people who breed for ranch horses often have animals that are born that appear to be gated, and they didn't know that they had two copies of this DMRT3 variant,
Huh.
but that some people request those animals because they're
Mhm.
smoother to ride and they don't
Mhm.
have the need to do the lead changes and whatnot, right? It
Right.
doesn't come to them. So my guess is probably I would lean towards that. And again, I am not a ranch sorting expert,
Right.
so
Right.
don't quote me on that. But then temperament wise, I think it's an individual thing. Personally, my horses that I like, when I
Mhm.
rank all of my horses, my personal preference, I like an animal that has one copy of curiosity and one copy of vigilance, because that's an animal that tends to be very clever and focused, but it's not a fire-breathing dragon, and it's not super distractible.
Right.
But my horses are often a little more to deal with. In other words, if I put a new bit on them, okay.
Yeah.
But if you do, maybe not.
Yeah.
Right? So they're a little more choosy about who they work with.
Right.
Versus the curiosity horse, which tends to be more amenable. Yeah, I'll do this. I'll do that. The extreme opposite is the vigilant horse, and these are animals that are super hyper focused. They're harder to train. But I think if you're going to compete and you're a serious trainer with real talent and patience for that kind of animal,
Mm-hmm.
the vigilant animal might be your best bet. That's the one you see flatten its ears and snap at the cow.
Yeah.
Right? And they're harder to deal with, and they're definitely a pain in the butt in their own stall,
Right.
but they're super, super focused.
Yeah. No, and
who are you? What do you want? Right?
yeah, no, that's so good. And I actually just thought of, I bet you if Fallon Taylor did a DNA test on her horse, Baby Flo, she probably would come out more vigilant because I she's told stories that she was like, no trainer wanted to work with her when Fallon got her, and she ended up being like a world champion barrel racer. So
Yep.
that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we could ask that question because we've definitely seen it in thoroughbreds and warm bloods. You can
Mm-hmm.
tell almost if you know the genotypes and you watch the horse for like 15 minutes in the stall and on the arena, you can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so good. That's so good. So you mentioned it in the beginning a little bit, but an important part of talking about seeing the genetic potential in future breedings or with foals is that it can show what disciplines they could be great in genetically, but it could also show what else they could excel at. Because I think it's really important that we understand as an industry that just because they were bred for a certain discipline, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the purpose or sport they ultimately end up succeeding in. So, knowing this, do you think that it will help owners decide on what training works best for the physical and mental well being of their horse and help promote the industry through knowing more about their DNA and genetic makeup?
It definitely makes a huge difference. It gives you these little hints and insights. It'll even
Huh.
help you if you've got 5 prospects and you can only show 2 this year. Knowing what their genes hold will help you to understand which ones you should try first, right? There's always going to be variability. If somebody tells you, "Oh, genetics is everything. It's the only thing that matters." That's not true.
Right.
That's just not true.
Yeah.
You know all the genetics, but you can't control for the rain that day
Yeah.
or that your ankle was sore or whatever it is, right? There
Right.
are going to be other factors. But understanding what a horse can do and what it likes to do and what
Mm-hmm.
you can do and what you like to do are such big pieces of the puzzle that they should never be ignored.
Right.
It makes a huge difference. And we do see those scenarios that you're alluding to. For example, in warm bloods, um, 2 show jumpers,
Mm-hmm.
they can create a dressage horse. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
likes to talk about that, but it happens. And we know that, 2 reining horses can create a cow horse
Yeah.
or a cutter. It happens, and vice versa. What's interesting is when we look at the ancestry readout, the ancestry analytics, we can often tell just on the basic composition which direction an animal's probably more likely to lean towards. Often you'll see 2 purebred quarter horses. They're
Mm-hmm.
supposedly the same registry, the same breed. One of them is a 14-2 downhill cutter,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is 16-2 uphill hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Same breed, genetically completely different.
Yes.
Completely different. And we know this, but everybody wants to think, well, genetically they must be the same because they're quarter horses, but they're not at all the same.
Yeah.
Their disciplines and purpose breeding are what separate them into groups.
Yes.
And so it
Yes.
makes sense to look at the genetic content before deciding for sure, oh yeah, this is going to be a great jumper. Is it?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah. No, and I mean, you see it all the time with thoroughbreds, especially off the track ones, that they were bred to race down the track, but they may have tried to race them and they just didn't have the heart for it. So then they retrain them for eventing, or there's a lot that become barrel racers. So it's really just like, I think knowing their genetic potential before can really like help determine where you train them for faster so that you're not wasting time with them on something
Yeah.
that they don't want to do, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. No, life's too short.
Yeah.
Ride
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So, um, I have to say that as someone who has always loved talking about equine genetics, this is so exciting for me to be able to talk about this kind of stuff. And I think with breeding season just right around the corner or either in full swing, um, it's the best time to talk about it. Something that I've noticed for a really long time is that a lot of people just talk about the surface level of genetics, whether it's color or just talking about like just dipping into the performance side a little bit. But what you guys are doing with Etalon is really taking it to that deeper level and really seeing how we can improve not only the happiness and well-being of the horse, but how to make them better athletes, how they can do their job better. Where do you hope this will take the equine industry into the future to be able to see more growth across all disciplines?
I would like to see the equine industry not die off.
Yes.
And my concern is that the path forward is so expensive and so difficult with such a high rate of failure
Mm-hmm.
that very few people are going to be able to manage it. And so we need to take every opportunity we have
Mm-hmm.
to tip the hand in our favor.
Yes.
And if you want to compete and you're a teenager and you don't have $1 billion,
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to go out and find a good horse that matches you and have a reasonable chance at success so you can begin to move up in the ranks, right?
Right.
And if understanding your horse's talents and weaknesses, or a prospect horse's talents and weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
helps you get that edge so that you have success, so that your parents will let you keep doing what you need to do and do well,
Right.
and justify the expense and the effort, this could be incredibly helpful and even key,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Everyone has bought a horse that wasn't what it was represented to
Mm-hmm.
be,
Yeah.
or sold an animal that didn't turn out the way they thought.
Right.
Right now, I'm holding on to this beautiful Lusitano stallion. I'm going on 3 years after I purchased it, and I can't register it as a full Lusitano because it was misrepresented to me,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
He's lovely, he's talented, and an incredible riding horse. But
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a breeding stallion.
Yeah.
So for someone else, he's probably this incredible horse because they're a better rider than I am in the show ring because I don't care about showing.
Right.
But for my purposes, I'm bummed, right?
Right.
Perfectly beautiful horses, but now I've wasted my time and money with something that I can't use. So for me, this kind of thing is very helpful. I can do a genetic test. I can tell it has the capabilities that I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it can do the things that I want. And I can even go back and I can test and tell, yeah, this is the breed that I want. But I have to wait for the rest of the world to catch up.
Right.
That means like the registries have to recognize, oh, well, this is actually what it was represented to be.
Yeah.
And just because somebody isn't doing their paperwork doesn't mean we should hold out this horse's entire future.
Yes.
That's what's happening. And so for me, it's totally discouraging. And I go, well, maybe I just won't do this anymore because it's too hard to battle all the paperwork, even though the science says this animal can do what it says it can do. And it actually is what it's represented to be. So having these bits of information and paying attention to them can make all the difference from what your horse can do to what you know your
Mm-hmm.
horse can do in the future to what it is you need it to do and be.
Yes. Yes. And I think there's a lot of people recently that have been asking the question of, well, what are the benefits for me? Like, why am I spending all this money on breeding this horse? Like, what am I going to get out of this? They want to know ahead of time what their investment is going to be. So having the DNA information in front of them will help them with that.
It's huge. I mean, if you think about the cost of DNA testing is less than, a couple weeks feed. How
Yeah.
much do you spend breeding a horse? It's like 10 grand at least. And you got to wait a year to find out if you were right or wrong. And now you got to wait a couple more years after that to see if
Yeah.
you can actually do it. So, geez.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Seems
no.
like a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. And Holly and Laura, I would love to hear your opinion on where you think it will go.
Yeah,
Where you hope to.
absolutely. Something that I think, well, I know performance and health really go hand in hand, right? You can't have a top performer that's unhealthy. And if you try to have one, you're not going to have it for very long. And that's why I think that genetics are really a great way for us to continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Not because you can look at a horse's health traits before you buy it or before you breed it and say, oh, these are bad traits, because
Mm-hmm.
as we've said, we don't think that there's such thing as a bad trait, right?
Mm-hmm.
What it means is that I can look at this horse that I know I'm going to need as a top performer, and I can be proactive in my management and my care to make sure that if there are any potential risks down the line, that I'm doing everything I can right now to make sure that they're very minimal. And I think that is the important information because people often think, I don't want to know these health risks or I don't want to know these health conditions because those are bad. But they're not bad. They're things that you need to know in order to prolong the care for your horse. So
Exactly.
I'd love to see a shift in the mentality from I don't want to know because it's bad to I do want to know because it means I'm going to prolong the health of my horse and I'm going to, by doing that, improve its performance overall.
Yes, exactly. I love what you said about being proactive in the management. Laura, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so in addition to the management of the horse once we actually have them here, being a lifelong breeder, going right into the core of what data can I use to make the best breeding decisions possible. Nothing is the guarantee, your horse will have or won't have. But for example, I have a mare who has moderate susceptibility for kissing spines. She's not showing any symptoms, but it allows me to ask stallion farm managers and owners when this horse raced, did he happen to exhibit any signs of back pain? It's a not so scary question that can give me more information, and I'm learning how to ask new questions to make the best decisions I can when I'm planning to bring that foal into the world in the first place.
Yes.
So really being able to add that value for the full life cycle of our equines, whether they're athletes, pasture pals. I have a retired girl who I ride, but I call her a princess. We paint her hooves purple every other month. And it's really, to Holly's point and to the goal of what we're all here to do, we're here to do the best we can for our horses. So
Yes.
starting that from when we're planning them is really where I get the, kind of the excitement factor from it.
No, I love that. Okay, so in your own words, how would you define an educated cowgirl?
Which one of us? Me? Them? Us?
All of you.
I think an educated cowgirl, in my opinion, is someone who listens carefully, considers the evidence, and makes her own decisions based on her homework and experience.
Love it.
That would be my opinion.
No, I love it. All right.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So I know we always say cowgirl up, right? Because cowgirl up, we think of someone who's strong, who's going to be able to make, a significant effort to overcome an obstacle or deal with a difficult situation, right? That is the heart of a cowgirl, is someone who's strong-willed, can grab the bit by the teeth and just run with it. And so I think that being an educated cowgirl or someone who can cowgirl up is someone who actually gives themselves the information to make those difficult decisions, instead of just making a best guess, right? Arm yourself with all of the genetic knowledge you possibly can to do the best by your horse, because at the end of the day, they're your partner and they're the one that you really need to impress.
Great. No, that's perfect.
I'll be completely honest. I don't think I can add anything other than what the two of them put together. So just to reiterate, go after all the knowledge that you can, nurture it, make the best decisions you can for your horse.
No, that's perfect. I love that answer. Thank you to Medica Equine for sponsoring this podcast. Your generous support means so much to me that you believe in my vision for the Educated Cowgirl podcast and will help me to continue to grow the show. Are you having trouble with your horse's skin? Scratches, dew poisoning, rain rot, sweat itch? Most available formulas are greasy and smelly and contain harsh chemicals. Medica is formulated by an equine veterinarian using natural ingredients to be pleasant to handle, gentle on the skin, and incredibly fast and effective against almost all skin issues. And we all know in the horse world, horses aren't the only animals we have. These products also work great on dogs too. Veterinarian level skincare without calling the vet. Grab some today at medicaequine.com, that's MEDICA equine.com, or ask if your local retailer carries Medica. The purity of nature and the power of medicine solutions for equine skin problems. All right, so for some fun rapid fire questions for you guys, if you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, who would it be?
Oh my God. Anyone alive or dead? Anyone?
Yes.
So I'm going to imagine when you ask this question, you get answers like, oh, Aristotle or
I haven't gotten that deep. No one's gotten that deep.
I imagine everybody's always going the high road, right? I would be interested in having dinner with Trump to see for myself what is actually going on. I would like to see firsthand what actually happens and what is actually being said and what's real and what isn't. Because I just don't know. Everybody says everything they want you to hear.
Right.
And no one actually knows.
No, yeah, no one actually knows, like, unless you're face to face with him. Yeah, no.
Right.
No,
And I have never been, and I would be curious to see what my take would be on who and what he is and what's actually happening and how real that stuff actually is.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Okay.
I will jump in there, and I'm going for some extra bonus points here because I have already had this dinner once and I would love to do it again. But I would say Billy Smith, our wonderful NRHA commissioner, just because he is so knowledgeable about genetics. And I feel like a lot of our thoughts on how the industry and how the sport should move forward align. And I love having conversations with him about it because he's so knowledgeable about the industry, about the horses. He's had so much experience. He's met with so many incredible horse owners and trainers and breeders that just like having a conversation with him is always so fascinating, especially because he can link it to the genetics and how we want to see things in the future. We actually sat down at the Run for a Million last year and had dinner, and that was kind of my first big experience chatting with him in that kind of setting. And so I would absolutely be on board to do that again. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, no, Billy is actually one of a really good family friend, and so I've had many dinners with him, and they're always entertaining but also very educational, so
absolutely, it's the perfect combination.
Yes.
I'd be a tie between either Dr. Norm Ducharme or Dr. Anina LaCour. So those were Dr. Ducharme was out at Cornell for many years in the equine department, and Dr. LaCour was actually our reproductive veterinarian specialist when I was a teenager growing up, and they were both mentors to me when I was on a pre-vet track. And I would love to revisit conversations with them and explore those in a different mindset now, 20 something years later.
Yeah. Great.
Kind of come very full circle with it all.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like it, like an updated, like this is where I'm at from when I last talked to you.
Yeah. Well, and from them, how have they seen the landscape evolve, and what are they putting weight in now? What advances and technologies, what companies like Etalon did we not have then that they could, how would they best utilize, and what would their perspective be with where we are now? Yeah,
no, that's great. Okay, so what is your biggest horse ick?
I'll jump in. Mine's not a horse ick. Mine is a people ick. When people complain about horses. So it's not actually a horse ick. It's like when the people are too stubborn, or fill in the words that I probably shouldn't say right now, to listen to their horse communicating with them.
Yeah. No, that's good.
I have to say the same thing. Like, it's not a horse ick, it's a people ick. I think a lot of the problems we see with horses are caused by the people who work with them. I will never forget, I was at an event once, and someone had a very poor performance with their horse. And they came out of the arena, and the first thing they did was said, he just wouldn't turn. And I understand there's situations where, like, you've got one hand on the withers and you're pulling back with the other hand, and that horse is just not turning. But it wasn't a situation like that, right? Most of the time, it's the riders not giving the right cues, they're not asking the right questions, or they're not doing it in a clear enough way. And it drives me crazy when I see people out there blaming their horses for things or for poor performance, when really, again, it's a team effort. So you can't do that. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I've actually had other people give the same answer as you guys. So
I'm going to go with internet experts. These are
quotes around experts, right?
Yes, big air quotes, like giant. These are people that your friend posts a video of them getting dumped because it's funny and they made a stupid mistake and it was funny.
Yeah.
And everybody jumps on their soapbox. Oh, wow, that's the wrong kind of bridle. And what were you thinking? And your heels
Yeah.
are good. Shut up.
Yeah.
What is the matter with you?
Yes.
It's gotten to the point where no one can share anything. And it takes so much courage to share anything that you aren't doing right when we're all not doing stuff right every single day.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. You have to have room to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the ability to say, what did I do here, without somebody ripping you apart in front of our audience?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what those people break down. So that's my biggest ick. Armchair experts.
Yep. Yep. I call them keyboard cowgirls.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So what is one life and or business hack that you swear by?
If you don't love what you do, don't do it. Do what you love and it comes easily, and it doesn't matter how hard it gets. You still can get out of bed and do it.
Love it. Love it.
Mine's way less fun. It's time blocking.
No, that's a good hack.
I live and die by time blocking and color coding.
Yes. Yep. No, that's good.
I'm going to say don't be afraid to start talking to strangers about what you do, because you never know, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious when you look at some people, like, I've been in grocery stores and seen girls in breeches and tall boots, and I'm like, hey, obviously I know that you horseback ride.
Yeah.
But if it's just your day-to-day life, you have no idea what people do or what their experience is or who they know or who they're connected with. And I think it's fascinating because sometimes if you talk about what you do to someone that you least expect to be involved in the industry, they will surprise you. And so that's what I always say is just do not be afraid to strike up a conversation with someone about what you do, because you never know what you're going to find out.
Yep. And you never know where connections will lead you. So no, that's good. Yeah. So this has been such a fun and fascinating conversation. Thank you again for taking the time to talk with me today. For those interested, where can they find out more about Etalon and follow along, or how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can head over to our website, which is Etalon, so etalondx.com. A lot of our information is on there. We have links to our blog posts, our studies, anything you could possibly need to ask. If it's not there, you can call our customer service team. They are live Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and are always excited to answer your questions. You can email us. You can like, share, love us on any sort of social media. We are here in all shapes and forms, and we are here for you, regardless of what your questions are.
We are real human beings. We actually answer the phone, and we actually talk to you about your horse.
So good.
And we love it.
Yeah, no, love it. Love it. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Educated Cowgirl. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, and will come back for more. In the meantime, if you would like to continue to support the show, make sure you hit that follow button on whichever platform you're listening on, follow me on social media, and make sure to leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to share the podcast, make sure you tag me in your Instagram stories at The Educated Cowgirl. But for now, stay blessed and ride on, cowgirls.